Polls close at 8 p.m. local time in California's second ever recall vote. The election is also raising a number of legal questions. For more, let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson, along with our Ed O'Keefe, who is helping me lead this discussion. All right, Jessica, can you explain the constitutionality of a recall election? And how does this happen in a state like California, where you have Democrats outnumbering Republicans almost 2-1?
Yeah, absolutely. So first a legal question and then a political question. So legally, how can we have a recall? Well, back in 1911, we created 3 systems of direct democracy in California. We have a really generous initiative process by which citizens can directly bypass the legislature and enact new laws, including amending our Constitution. We have the referendum, where we can bypass the legislature and pull back laws. And we have the recall, where we can say there's an elected official and we really don't enjoy them, and we don't enjoy them so much that we don't want them to serve out their full term, and we can recall them. There was a suit that you might be referring to that said the recall is just unconstitutional, period, because the idea being, well, what if only, 51 out of 100 voters say we should recall Governor Newsom? That means 49 voters want him, but he's recalled, and then as a result, we pick somebody who has far fewer votes than Governor Newsom. Let's say we pick Larry Elder, who gets 7 votes. And the idea was, well, that violates the Equal Protection Clause, that violates the principle of one person, one vote. That was a legal challenge that just went up before the federal courts in California. And a judge rejected it and said, no, this is permissible. There are 2 separate ballot questions, no equal protection problems. How do we get here, to the second part of your question, how do we get here politically in deep blue California, where we might be recalling our Democratic governor? The answer basically is 2 things. One, there was a state court judge a few months ago who said we're going to lengthen the amount of time that signature gatherers have to put this recall on the ballot. Lengthening that time is the only reason we're here talking about this. And 2, Governor Newsom had some unforced errors. He went out to a pretty lavish dinner party right around the same time that the judge made that decision about lengthening the time for signature gatherers. Right around the same time he was telling the rest of us, stay home. I know it's hard, but shelter in place. So it was kind of a perfect storm politically.
Elaine, given how many times we've given the French Laundry advertising tonight, you'd think that their reservation system's even more overloaded than usual. Yeah. Jessica, you mentioned that state court decision that extended the ballot petition time, or the recall petition time, and extended it for a greater amount of time. If the governor were to lose tonight, is there any chance he potentially mounts a legal challenge based on that judge's decision to say, as you said, we wouldn't be here right now if you hadn't extended this, and I don't think it was fair that you did?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is the ship sailed, the train left the station, whatever metaphor we want to use. I think the Newsom campaign made a couple of legal mistakes as well, and one of them was not appealing that decision once it was made. So it's just too late in the game, both politically and legally, to try and unwind an election. If there's one thing that state court judges really don't like to do, it's to pull back on a decision that the voters have already made. And just the idea of a state court judge, or even a panel of appellate judges, saying, we know that you had plenty of time to appeal that decision, you didn't. We had the election, and now you just decided because you lost to appeal it. I don't think that there's any way that would be successful legally. So no, there might be other legal issues, but that's not going to be one of them.
Well, if Governor Newsom is recalled, Democrats may point to the fact that his party preference was left off of the ballot, and party preferences, we know, help voters determine who they'd like to vote for, especially if they typically vote along party lines. Jessica, can you explain why it was left off and how that could impact future elections?
Yes, another just one of these kind of crazy moments of this also already crazy recall election. So the law actually was changed fairly recently in California by Democrats because there was a Democratic state senator who was recalled. And the law says now, if you're standing for recall election, you can list your party preference. Now, again, this is a new law. It was enacted really directly in response to a Democratic lawmaker being recalled. And Governor Newsom's legal team, I alluded to before, made a few unforced errors. The second one really was they forgot to file the paperwork to list his party preference. Now, look, if he loses, we'll point to these errors and say, oh my gosh, these were really catastrophic errors. If he survives, we'll say, well, these were paperwork errors. And, I do think it's important for us to remember, how many people in California don't know that Governor Newsom is a Democrat? I'm not sure that in that Venn diagram of people who are voting in the recall and then people who don't know that Governor Newsom is a Democrat, how many people are actually overlapping in that?
Wait, you're saying there are voters out there who don't realize he's a Democrat?
No, I'm saying I think there's a very few percentage of people who are members of the electorate and will vote in the recall and don't already know that he's a Democrat.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. Look, vote by mail was popular during the presidential election last year, of course, due to the pandemic. What are the concerns potentially about vote by mail in this recall election?
Yeah, so in California, we've been using vote by mail for a number of years, frankly, without any big, quote unquote, voter fraud problems. Now, are there always issues with election administration where there are mistakes, there are snafus? Yes, but California has a long history of using vote by mail. In this particular election, we decided that we're going to send a ballot automatically to every registered voter. Now, what are the problems? In reality, I would say very few. We're making it easier for people to vote. They can either hand their ballot to a mail carrier or they can go to a ballot drop box, as I did. They can bring their ballot to an in-person voting place. They can give it to somebody else. But what political problems does it bring up? Well, we know that there are people who have said that vote by mail is susceptible to voter fraud. And the idea that we have so many vote by mail ballots, therefore, I think opens up the state to at least these accusations that there will be voter fraud.
Right. So polls don't close until 8 p.m. local time. And if Governor Newsom defeats this recall by a small or large margin, do you expect pushback legally, Jessica, from the Republican Party? And if so, how could that play out? How might that play out?
I think this is going to be a little bit of deja vu all over again from the 2020 presidential election. So we have already seen, for instance, the leading candidate on the Republican side, Larry Elder, he had kind of an embarrassing moment where on his website it already said, basically, we lost this election. It was due to voter fraud. Again, this is before any vote has been recorded. And so report your voting irregularities here. I think the important thing about that isn't so much the campaign snafu or the embarrassment of that. It's that we know what the talking points are going to be if Governor Newsom is in fact not recalled, which I expect he will not be recalled. The talking points will be that there was fraud, that there was corruption, there were irregularities. What does that mean? It means not just political arguments, but we could see some of the same lawsuits that we saw in the wake of the 2020 presidential election. And I expect that we'll have the same result, which is state court judges, federal judges, judges who are nominated by Democrats, judges nominated by Republicans. They'll say, where's the evidence? And if there's none, then I think, again, it'll be a replay of what we saw after the 2020 election. Those cases will be dismissed, and Governor Newsom goes on to run for re-election in 2022.
Right, but as viewers of CBSN well know, these are legal arguments, Jessica, that you and I and others have talked about time and time again. So we'll continue to watch and see how it plays out. Jessica Levinson, Jessica, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.